pop those drinks. It's time for Sports Around the Bar. Welcome into Sports Around the Bar, your weekly sports talk show. As always, I'm Jake, your bartender, and I'm joined on center stool by my co-host Drew. And Drew, football, basketball, hockey, the only one we're not talking about today is baseball out of the major ones, man. Do you want to start playoffs? Do you want to start by talking about your Chiefs? If you haven't heard, they made some pretty big moves out there.
Frank wants to talk about Frank Clark.
Surprising, yeah. He said he knew what the first topic was going to be today, and guess what? He's not disappointed. Obviously, it's the big news coming out of the NFL. This draft week, huge trade coming out of Kansas City and the Seattle Seahawks. Before we ask who won and who lost and everything, Drew, why don't we take it from the top, man? Let's start by talking about Frank Clark, okay? Because the Chiefs got a good player here, okay? Seattle gave up a good player here. I wouldn't call him great. It's not like they traded for Khalil Mack, but they got an incredibly effective defensive end, which is hard to find in the NFL. He's 25 years old, right? I'm trying to sell it here.
No, you're right.
He's 25 years old, so he's still young. You sign him to a 5-year mega extension here that's worth $105.5 million. 63.5 of that's guaranteed. So I look at this deal, and I'm like, okay, the Chiefs had some money to spend right now, at least in the short term. They were able to backload the contract. So at least for the next year or two, they might be okay on the cap side of things. And they got a decent player. The problem here comes in when you look at what they gave up. And that is pick 29 in this year's draft, which is a first rounder. For everyone not in the know on that. They gave up a 2020 second, the lowest of their two, but still a 2020 second, and then swapped third round picks, Drew. They gave up a king's ransom for a guy holding out. Now it's your turn. What are your thoughts, man?
But you know I called you. You know that I called you.
Like 8 seconds after it happened.
As soon as it happened, and I was upset. I was not happy. I was frustrated. I look at a second year in a row where Kansas City is not drafting in the first round, and I don't know what you guys feel about the draft, but when I don't draft or my team does not draft in the first round, I think of an instant starter not being there starting. And as we all know, Kansas City has a lot of holes. And you could tell I was completely upset with it. I was not okay with it. And I look at all of the trades that Kansas City has done in the past and how we have literally not fought for more picks. I look at the Alex Smith trade, a third-round pick. I look at Marcus Peters when we traded him around. It was only a second-round pick. When we got rid of D. Ford, it was a second-round pick. And it's like, why can't we get a first-round pick for some of these top players? Let's not forget Marcus Peters was one of the best corners when we traded him away. You know, he was ranked as one of the best corners. Yeah, there was a lot of flaws in his game and off-the-field issues with his mouth. But Alex Smith was a playoff-winning quarterback. D. Ford had his best year. And it seems like we can't ever get a good value out of our guys when we trade them away. But then we're willing to give a king's ransom for a guy that had one good year that makes him one of the better pass rushers in the league, but he hasn't really been doing it his whole career.
Also, Steve says, not to interrupt, breaking news, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is officially called up. He makes his debut for Toronto on Friday, so we did sneak some baseball in there. It's big. I can't wait to watch him. I hope, if he's anything like his dad, obviously he's going to have a successful MLB career. Can't wait to watch him. For now, though, I think let's go back and talk about Frank Clark. And when I see this, like you said, they traded D. Ford for a 2020 second-round pick. So essentially you gave up D. Ford, you gave up a first-round pick, and then you paid this guy more money than D. Ford got from the San Francisco 49ers, and you get to switch picks in the third round. That was tough. You get to switch third-round picks with the Seahawks, all for Frank Clark. I mean, this is a king's ransom, man. There's no doubt in my mind. Seattle won this trade, and they won it handily because you look at this deal. Frank Clark said he wasn't going to sign this his franchise tag. So they had until July 15th to give him a new mega deal, or he was going to hold out for the season. And you're going to go trade all this? This is where you get the guy on the cheap. This is where you go and trade for him and you don't give that much up. Instead, Kansas City's like, hold on, let me get my wallet.
You only want a second rounder? I got a first rounder. You could take that one too. Listen, after I let it sit there and just kind of boil in my head about how upset I was about this, and Frank said, before I go on, Frank says, really, he's worth a first-round pick all day. Man, I get it. Let me get to my point here, and I didn't want to ignore your comment. I let it sit there, and it bugged me. You know, it really did bug me. And I sat there, and I thought about it, and I go, well, we are switching schemes. We're going to a 4-3 from a 3-4. You look at D. Ford, the only ability D. Ford has that is, you know, above and beyond most of other players in the NFL is rushing the passer at a speed. His run game or run stopping game is literally no, it's not. It doesn't exist. I mean, I've watched him get ran all over. Frank Clark does bring that into this aspect of this defensive scheme. He does come in with a great run-stopping ability, and he's a lot bigger of a body. And when you ask a 4-3 end to sit there and hold the edge, it's usually a bigger body guy. And I thought about it for a long time. If we would have kept D Ford, who are those smaller defensive ends and 4-3s that succeeded? And it kind of took me a long time to come up with some of these guys. And one of the biggest names I could come up with was Dwight Freeney. Now, would I sit there and say D Ford's Dwight Freeney?
No.
Exactly. So I don't mind this move now after thinking about it. And I also thought, what happens at pick number 29 this year? Do we go for one of those elite quote-unquote pass rushers in this draft? What if he's a bust? At least with this 29th pick overall, in my opinion in this draft, we drafted Frank Clark.
Look, I understand that thought process. And this is the safe play, right? You go and get the guy you know is going to be good. Frank Clark put up 13 sacks this past year. Had a really good year. The past 2 years before that, he had 10 and 9. So essentially, you just gave the biggest defensive end contract in football to a guy that's averaging 9.5 sacks. If you take the contract year out, Drew, I'm worried about it because guys play really hard when they know they're due for some money. And then usually you see them kind of regress back towards where they're normally playing at, or you see them get worse because they just got paid. So I think there's still some risk in this deal. It's the safer of the two moves because, like you said, it's easy to draft a bust in today's NFL. Any position can wind up being a bust. But the Kansas City Chiefs already hit on Patrick Mahomes. You know your offense is going to be really good. Right. I'm saying there's no problem being risky here and just drafting a guy. You don't absolutely have to have a defensive end like Frank Clark. It helps. I like Frank Clark as a player, but you could afford to take some risks because you know your offense is going to be so good. You know your offense is going to keep you in games. You could have just rolled the dice and tried to get a Justin Houston or someone like that on an incredibly cheap contract. Right. And then you can go spend the money on another bridge guy, and your team is just that much better. Instead, they're selling out to one player. And we've talked about Chiefs having money problems coming up when Mahomes gets paid, when Travis Kelce's due for his next contract, when Tyreek Hill, who, by the way, got cleared of any child abuse charges today, whenever he's due for his next contract. I think that's 2 years down the road, but they're going to run into money trouble. The Chiefs, again, a team that's looking at money troubles in the face coming up in the future, to go out and give a $106 million contract to somebody, it's kind of confusing to me.
Do that. It's a big contract. There's no doubt about it. Regardless of if it's cap friendly or not, and 2 years in a year, you're looking at a lot of big names on the offense that need to be signed to big contracts because they're all a top elite level in the NFL. Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, those guys are going to be looking for their big contracts. They're going to want as much money as they possibly can get. I think that this is a sign to say that Kansas City is willing to watch those guys walk out the door and go into a different uniform, because with a contract like this where they're like, we need to focus right now on our defense, and if it costs us an arm and a leg to put good players on our defense, so be it, because we are at some point in time going to pay Patrick Mahomes $40 a year.
Yeah, that absolutely might happen. Let's go to the comments really quick. Damien says, do we see the Bears doing any trade ups in this draft? And he also wants to know if they're going to be able to trade for Robbie Gould as well. I don't see them trading up, not into any of the high rounds. I think the Bears kind of made their bed getting a guy like Khalil Mack. That, to me, you look at that trade and then you look at the Frank Clark trade, I'd rather be in Chicago's position, give up the 2 first-round picks and get a guy like Khalil Mack who, yes, he is a couple years older than Frank Clark, but you're getting a dominator who's going to be one of the best, top 3 edge defenders in this draft. Frank Clark may regress. Frank Clark may go back to a 9 or 10 sack season, and then we're talking about paying this guy a ton of money to not be anything special. You needed to get a special player. I said this to you on the phone beforehand. You need to get a special player when you give up special player level assets, like that first rounder, like the second round on top of it. And I'm just not sure Frank Clark is quote unquote special.
I get what you're saying. I mean, Frank here is saying, I think your defense is better now in Kansas City. I agree with you. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Bo's saying, is Frank going to have the same motor? Statistically, a lot of guys, when they get paid, they have down years. I really hope not. The guy's 25 years old. He's not considered a Hall of Famer. Maybe his next goal after he's made that big contract is, I want to be a Hall of Famer. I want to be the best that's ever played, because those are the guys that don't stop after being paid.
And that's his biggest question. Can he stay motivated? I want to say yes. You want to believe when you're trading all these assets away that he's going to be that high character guy that's going to fit in your system, and he's going to play hard every down because he wants to be great. He wants to be one of the guys that goes to Canton and gets into the Hall of Fame. But like you said, not everybody's like that. Some people are motivated by money. Some people, all they want to do is get paid. And I'm not saying Frank Clark is that guy. I don't know him.
Le'Veon Bell.
You don't know too many Frank Clark quotes out there either, is the thing. I mean, there's not too many. He's not one of the more well-known players in the NFL. So I don't know. I guess that's the biggest question. If I'm the Chiefs, you better believe I was doing some soul searching with the guy and trying to figure out what he's about before I made this trade.
Bo said the 12th man here paid Russell and had to make room for Bobby and Reed's upcoming contract. Frank was an odd man out. I think Frank's comments is what made Frank.
I think Frank not wanting to sign a franchise tag is what did it.
That's what I'm saying. It's comments of not wanting to sign the franchise tag. Because that's what made him out.
Yeah, and the Seahawks were saying exactly what we said. Hey, man, you put up 13 sacks this year. That's fantastic. Can you do it again? Before we go give you $106 million, can you do it again? The Chiefs said, you know what? We're willing to take that gamble. So that's why they made the trade. I absolutely think Seattle won this trade from that perspective. I still think the Chiefs got better on defense. But with what they gave up, you probably could have got better. You probably could have done more. And not everybody's willing to trade their star defensive end away, but they gave up an awful lot to go out there and bring in Frank Clark. I just hope he pans out for him, man. I hope we see that upward trajectory continue, and maybe next year he puts up 13, 14, 15 sacks instead.
I think Steve Spagnuolo can get a lot out of him. I don't think he's going to digress by any means. We all know that Steve Spagnuolo has made his career in pressure, and as a defensive coordinator, is putting pressure on the quarterback. So I think he's going to see a lot of heavy blitz packages behind him where the linebackers are coming in. The question is it enough? Because we all know Kansas City took a lot of loss of big names. So did some of these, smaller names like Okafor, Ogba, Hitchens, Ragland, do these guys find a way to get there and help Frank Clark get to the quarterback? Because it's going to be all about, can he do it again? Can he get double-digit numbers in sacks again? I mean, that's what I'm hoping for. But it's a risk. But I don't blame him. As far as Kansas City Chiefs fans, look at it as with the number 29th pick, we drafted Frank Clark.
25-year-old defensive end, right?
Ken, I'm glad you're back, man.
Absolutely. And now I'm about 8 miles behind in the comments here, but Steve said, our thoughts on Le'Veon Bell not showing up to minicamp. Is it signs of things to come? Let me say this, Steve. Pump the brakes. They're voluntary workouts. Somebody tell Tom Coughlin this is all voluntary, okay? Some guys just like working out on their own. They like working with their regular trainers. They don't want to go to the team facilities and work with guys that, yes, they are familiar with them, but they feel like they can get better on their own. I think Le'Veon Bell is just an example of that. I'm saying right now, this isn't a red flag. But if we start seeing a little bit more of this come training camp time, when these workouts become mandatory instead of voluntary, then yeah, that's when it's time to panic.
Hey, Bo, just real quick, you said Frank is going to be a solid, no doubt for you guys. He's going to be a solid player. We don't doubt that. That's not what I'm getting at.
And
that's
I'm not trying to sit there and say he's going to totally bomb out.
Yeah, that's not my comments. It's just statistically, when you get paid, you don't have as well of a season as you did before. And regardless of how good you are, if the rest of the players around you, which you got to remember, Kansas City took a complete overhaul besides Chris Jones and Ragland and Hitchens, that whole defense is completely different. Everyone is different. So the question is, can Frank Clark do it by himself if he has to?
And I totally understand that. But, again, Seattle wasn't the best defense in the league. He still managed to shine. I hope that at least with Chris Jones playing next to him, he's going to be able to make an impact. The Chiefs' defensive line should get a little bit better, especially if both these guys stay on the field for longer. The question for me is going to be, can Frank Clark continue that trajectory upward, or do we see a little bit more of a regression? Because if he regresses, Drew, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to be slamming the Chiefs talking about this trade. If he keeps going, then it's going to be one of those I told you so moments where they believed in this guy and it panned out. But if I had to bet on one right now, I'd say he's probably going to either hold steady where he's at or probably go back, take a couple steps back. Also, Ron asks, what 2 picks do the Seahawks now have? They have pick 29 from the Chiefs, and I believe their pick was 20. It's either 20 or 21. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah. But they're in the 20s with both of their picks. That's still pretty good. You're picking back-to-back pretty quick in the first round.
And in this draft, it's great to have 2 first-round picks.
Exactly.
Will, I'm glad you're back, man. I'm glad you're all doing better. Ken also said Chiefs lost their secondary and built their line. I'm still trying to figure that out. Man, I think what it was is that they just said, okay, well, we're going to focus on our line during free agency, and when they felt like they didn't get enough pieces, that's when they value the 29th pick as going and be tradable for Frank Clark. With the number 2 picks and the 2 picks in the second round, dude, I'm right there with you. If it isn't defensive back, if it's not 2 corners or corner and the safety, I will be very frustrated because there's no doubt about it. We need a lot of help back there.
Well, they just listened to me. You win on the defensive line first, right? That's what you build on, but that's what they subtracted on, too. I mean, yeah, they had some changeover in their secondary as well, but that's okay when you look at the way these guys played last year. Your defensive line, at least in Kansas City, played very, very well. So when you lost guys like D. Ford and you lost on the other side, whose name I'm drawing a blank on, I just said it.
Justin Houston?
Justin Houston, yeah. When you're subtracting all these guys, all this talent's leaving the roster, you got to do better than Okafor. You got to do better than Ogba in replacing them. Otherwise, your defense is going to regress even worse than it was. It was already one of the worst ones. They want to win on the defensive line. I think this kind of shows you that they're a team that wants to build on the defensive line first. So I'm okay with these moves first. And then, like you said, you go fill in a couple corners in the draft, this defense might actually rebound pretty quickly.
Steve says, look at Jerry Hughes in Buffalo. He ended up paying off and became a top defensive end. Anything can happen, Drew. Keep the faith. Man, I am. Trust me.
Look at Albert Hainsworth. He was a famous Titan. Got paid and then suddenly wasn't any good anymore.
Trust me.
And I'm not saying Frank Clark is
I'm
Albert
going to trust
Hainsworth,
the system. But tell me right now what Brett Veach has really done as the GM for the Kansas City Chiefs. What has he done? What signings, what picks do you sit there and go, thank God he's our GM? Because I haven't seen it yet. And at this bust, if he's not out, I don't know what I'm going to do.
No, I agree. And like I was telling you on the phone before when we were talking about this could be one of those moments where Kansas City's Super Bowl window shrinks because you're missing, like, you just need to have an adequate GM. He needs to do just enough, and this team could be winning Super Bowls. If he keeps taking these steps and we keep overspending on guys and we keep missing on draft picks, we could be talking about Patrick Mahomes being one of those guys who just never really puts it together. But you can't all put the blame on him. It's because the team isn't really ready. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because signing Frank Clark to a big contract like this takes money away from Kelsey,
exactly.
Hill. I mean, those guys are going to want big contracts. Like I said, Hill's going to be looking for the top paid receiver in the NFL. If we can't do it. We can't afford it.
No, I totally agree. You can only pay so many guys.
So is Frank Clark worth paying him as the top tier defensive end, worth losing Tyreek Hill? That's where Frank Clark literally has to have double-digit sacks. He needs to be upward closer to 20 to make it worth it. If not, you're talking about losing one of the best receivers in the NFL soon.
You paid him like Khalil Mack. He's got to play like Khalil Mack next,
right.
And we'll see if that happens. Also, Ken says Agba is not going to make you happy like you think. I agree with you, Mr. 4 sacks a year. I don't think he's an instant Band-Aid, and I think that's why they were this aggressive going out there trying to get a defensive end to replace him, because they already looked at it last year like our defense was atrocious, but our defensive line made enough plays for us to win games. If you take that away, Kansas City can go from a 12, 13, 14-win team to somewhere around 9 or 10 because the defense is not keeping up. Offense comes and goes. We say that all the time. It's that old familiar saying, defense wins championships. You have to play a little bit of defense if you're going to beat teams. I don't care who your quarterback is or how good the offense is. You're going to have off days. It's going to happen. Eventually, it happens to everybody. If you don't build the defense up to make up for those days, you're not going to win Super Bowls. It's just not going to happen.
Ken says Ogba could be a big-name player, but he just didn't have the drive in Cleveland that we needed. I'm right there with you.
I don't know. I really don't. I mean, I feel like he got his chance, and then he just didn't pay.
I think that's what he's getting at. He had the opportunity. His drive wasn't there to succeed. I mean, there's no doubt. Cleveland is a good defense.
Well, they were 24th last year. They did regress, but I think part of that was depth. On paper, yes, I agree with you. They have a lot of good players.
The year that he had the chance was last year.
Well, he was there for a couple of years, so
that's what I'm saying. Yeah. He had a chance to actually be good, and
he's had his chance.
We'll see.
My whole point on Agba is when you've had these chances and you've seen a guy lose because it's his spirit or he's not there or whatever. That's a hard thing to build. It's harder than people think because think about it. When you get there, all these guys should be motivating themselves, right? You should be sitting there saying, I'm a starter and I've only put up 3 to 4 sacks a year like Agba had. You got to sit there and say something's wrong with you. So short of him sitting there having like a come to Jesus moment where he's like, man, the Browns didn't want me. They got rid of me. I need to step it up or I'm going to be out of the league. Not everybody can have those moments, man. So I don't blame the Chiefs for wanting to get better. I just think you could have paid someone like Brandon Graham in free agency and then turned around and spent this pick on another young defensive end or another top-end corner, and the defense would be better off. That's all I'm saying. They could have done more with what they gave up.
I agree. Robert says, do you think the Niners will draft Bosa at the number 2 or trade down?
Say that again? 49ers taking Bosa?
Or trade down.
I think they should trade down if they have the opportunity, even though I like Bosa. They've spent a lot of picks in that defensive line here. If you can rack up the picks and let somebody else take a defensive end, because there are no sure things in this draft, I'm always in favor of trading down. It's always a viable strategy as long as you get a few picks to make it worth it. If they don't get that trade option, I think Bosa's the guy. And I know you kind of disagree with me. You think Quinnen Williams is the next one off the board. And I love Quinnen Williams, too. I think he's one of the best defensive linemen on the interior in this draft. But I think they need help on the edge, and there's no one better on the edge, in my opinion, right now than Nick Bosa.
Braun said, with the rumors of the Cardinals not taking Murray, do you think that they'll take Bosa at number 1, meaning Curry will fall to the Raiders or Giants or Miami?
Let me just pump the brakes. And to kind of go against what I said last episode, where Baker Mayfield snuck up into the top pick last year in the last couple days before the draft, right?
Yeah.
Arizona recently put out on Twitter a promo video trying to sell season tickets and everything, showing all their players and all their highlights and everything. You know who's missing out of that? Josh Rosen. So when Josh Rosen is not in your promo video for the future going forward, they're taking a quarterback. They're already sold on this. What this is the due diligence. They leaked this to the media saying, we're not interested in Kyler Murray, so they can go gauge interest from other teams in case somebody wants to go and offer them the farm. Like, if they can get 2 first-round picks for this pick and someone else can go draft Kyler Murray, they need enough things that's worth it to move down. That's exactly what this is.
There's multiple teams with multiple first-round picks in this draft.
Short of Miami, or apparently Dan Schneider out of Washington, who is all in on trading up to get a quarterback, short of one of those teams trading, multiple first-round picks or something like that, Arizona's going to take Kyler Murray. You can take it, I don't want to say to the bank, but I feel pretty reasonably certain about this. I'm still all in on Kyler going number 1 overall, unless a trade happens.
It would shock me.
Like I said, if they get a great trade from somebody, maybe then they move on from that first overall pick and they say we'll stick with Rosen again, give him another chance, and just build this team with these extra picks. Short of that, the Cardinals are taking Kyler Murray. I don't think you can go any other direction. You could take Bosa, but you might as well trade down if you're not taking a quarterback at number 1, right? Because there are teams that need quarterbacks.
It's true, but if you look desperate though, you're not going to get a whole lot at number 1. I'm right there with you. I mean, how much does Josh Rosen really want to play for this team after it's all said and done? After all these rumors speculate around him not being their guy, I mean, how much do you get out of him? The whole knock on him coming out of the draft is how dedicated is this guy to playing the game of football? That's literally the biggest knock on him. They said he was the most pro ready. They said it was literally a guy that you just give the playbook and he learns it. And he fell. He did. He fell in the draft because
like 12. That's not.
But he fell in the draft because I honestly think the question of how passionate are you about football came into effect.
I don't think it's the passion.
Do.
Well, let me say this. I don't think it's the passion.
His own coach.
Well, hear me out here.
His own coach.
Hear me out here.
Said that.
Hear me out here. Oh, I get that. That was all the criticism and everything. I don't think it was the passion. I think that was a little bit of finger pointing because things weren't going right. Everyone says Josh Rosen was the most NFL-ready quarterback out of last year's draft, but the Cardinals were not the most NFL-ready team. I think that's entirely what it was. They had no talent around the guy, no offensive line to protect a guy who's not going to scramble and make things happen on his own. So, yeah, everyone's asking why he failed. He had no receivers playing well. Everyone's going to say Larry Fitzgerald. Larry Fitzgerald's 36 years old, okay? Give the guy a break. He's not carrying anyone anymore, okay? He didn't have the back for it. David Johnson's coming off a major wrist injury. Was not the same. Did not have the offensive line in front of him. The offensive line played terribly. They had nothing going for them on offense, and everyone's sitting there saying, why did a pocket quarterback not work out? There's your answer. I mean, really. That's the simple terms of it.
CJ says, is this a solo show?
Who's talking too much? Is it Drew or is it me? I mean, usually it's me. I usually talk too much. I've been trying to let him say something because this is cheese.
All right, Steve said, T.J. Hawkinson to Buffalo is starting to catch fire. Josh Allen, Brandon Beane were watching film together, and apparently Allen looked over and said, we're going to need him. Dude, if that happened, I just want to say I called it. He fell into my mock draft at that pick.
I have him going one more deeper. I have them, I think, defense in Buffalo on their first pick. I think I had them taking Montez Sweat and buffing up that defensive line.
That pick would not surprise me. Not even a little bit. As they watch Gronkowski tear them apart year after year, they want their own tight end to do that.
They're pretty much done paying Charles Clay big money to not do anything at tight end for them. I absolutely think Hawkinson should be in the draft conversation for them. There's no reason he shouldn't be. It's a good pick. If they take that there instead of a defensive end, I'm not going to be like, man, Buffalo messed up. Yeah. That'd be a great pick for anyone. I think anyone outside of the top 5 could realistically draft T.J. Hawkinson, and I'm not going to sit there and say it's a bad move.
All right, Damon said Cardinals is so damn confused who they want to draft. They might as well trade that pick for the first overall. I don't think they're confused, man. I literally think it's smoke and mirrors. I think it's about to see what the value is that other teams look at that number 1 overall pick.
Exactly, because unless you're the Raiders sending your scouts home early, a lot of teams know what they're doing in the draft and will put out misinformation to try to influence the other teams. And who knows, maybe Gruden's playing 3D chess and him sending all of his scouts home and everything like that a week before the draft is him sitting there trying to play like, I don't know what's going on or we're in disarray when they already have the game plan set. So every one of these teams, you can't trust anything you hear out of the media except for this show, obviously. No Cardinals have contacted us as of yet. But you can't trust what you hear in the media with any kind of these draft rumors because a team that might want a quarterback will sit there and say, we don't have any interest in him, so that other teams kind of back off him too. So there's a lot of smoke screens. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors. It's a lot of stuff that, honestly, a week from now, we're going to be talking about, like, man, can you even believe they was talking about that?
Ron, man, I promise you we'll get to the NBA. We'll talk about it next. We're just going to finish the NFL up real quick, man, but just hold on. I know you're excited about your Portland Trail Blazers. Just pump the brakes just a little bit for us.
Well, let's not talk about the Chiefs the entire episode, Drew. Why don't we move on to the Broncos?
We're talking about the Cardinals.
AFC West. Well, we were.
I got one more comment.
More
and we can
Chiefs
move
thing.
on. No, it's not about the Chiefs. It's all about what the Titans are. Never mind. It's not. About
Have
the
I
Titans.
mentioned the Titans today?
Yeah, you probably have.
Not yet. I've been keeping count.
CJ said, love the insight. You guys are very sports savvy guys, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And, man, we love hearing from you guys. We appreciate all the great questions and everything in the comments. We love bouncing stuff back and forth. We love hearing your opinions, too. The show's better when we're all kind of moving in sync and everything. So thank you guys as well.
And then this show is actually called Sports Around Jake. I don't know if you knew that. You nailed it on.
I'm pretty sure he's talking about you. You've been dominating the conversation today.
First show ever. All right, last comment, I promise. Frank says, Arizona is going to get 3 Sooners in this draft, minimum 2. They will get one of the offensive line. Dude, it's a
Could
possibility.
be Marquise Brown, too. I mean, Hollywood Brown could fall to them in the second round. Honestly, this receiving class is so deep. I don't know any direction. I know we did mock drafts and everything. These teams could go any direction they want to.
I think minus DK Metcalf, the rest of our number 1 and number 2 picks were literally swapped. I mean, because the wide receiver core is literally open. It's up to, whatever your team's looking for in a receiver. I think I have, I can't remember who I gave. It's blanking in my mind right now because I don't have a list in front of me.
I think you had A.J. Brown second off the board. I think I might have 2. But
I think I had A.J. Brown. No, you didn't have A.J. Brown fall until the second round.
No. That was Kelvin Harmon
that
we swapped on. But that's okay.
Well, either way.
Moving forward here, Steve says we need more Drew talk. Steve, stop. That's like saying you want to hear more from the Buffalo Bills. That's just not true. Nobody needs that, okay?
I can't even talk that much, man. That's why he talks a lot. Because I can't do it.
And also, Ron asked
I think I got like 10 words in my vocabulary.
Ron asked if we are on Instagram. We are actually not on Instagram right now. I know Facebook owns Instagram. It would make sense to, but I just don't feel like the sports talk game is that big on Instagram. Maybe we eventually move into there in the future, but for now, it's just Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter for us.
Damon said, who do you all see the Bears replacing Jordan Howard's spot in the NFL?
I think they'd love Josh Jacobs if he falls that far, but beyond that, there are a lot of running backs towards the bottom end. It could be someone like Bryce Love that if they can get him in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, the Bears are much better off waiting and taking a guy at the bottom. I know they don't have top picks to go out there and get him. I don't want to see the Bears trade up for a running back, though.
No.
There's so much talent in this draft. Even at running back, none of these guys are Zeke Elliott, but you're going to get quality guys out of the bottom end of this draft. They need to wait and take anybody. I'd like to see someone like Bryce Love move there.
Yeah, luckily for them is a lot of the talent is anywhere from late 2nd round to 3rd and 4th round running back talent in the draft, quote-unquote draft talent. But, yeah, they got plenty of time to think about who they want to pick. I think they should let the dominoes fall. I think if they take Josh Jacobs that high, even though I do have him falling in the 1st round of my mock draft just to a different team, I think it's going to be a little bit of a reach. I don't think there's a guy that sits there and dominates it like, Saquon Barkley did last year in draft. I think it's something that they need to sit back and just kind of wait and see what happens. But there's no doubt about it. They need a powerhouse running back. They need a big body that likes to run up in the middle because that's what they're missing.
Also, Frank says the Raiders are taking Jacobs. They're not going to give him the chance. Look, Frank, if it's in the 1st round, fire John Gruden today and pay him out the rest 8-year, $10 million a year contract he's got because he doesn't need to be a 1st-round pick. When you have all these needs, running back is so... Look at the Phillip Lindsays of the world. Look at the Devontae Freemans. Le'Veon Bell didn't go in the 1st round. You can get great running backs deep in every draft. You just have to keep your eyes open. There's no reason you need to take Josh Jacobs the first off the board in the 1st round. If they take him pick 35 they have in the 2nd round, I think it's the 3rd pick in that round, I'd live with it. But honestly, there's so many other directions they could go. There's so many other needs on that team. They don't need to be reaching on a running back. Go take a 3rd or a 4th round guy, or better yet, take a 4th and a 6th round running back and let one of them pan out.
Okay, last football comment. We'll move on to the
I want to talk Chris Harris still. That's big news. We'll skip Marshawn Lynch retiring. Marshawn Lynch is gone. Boo.
Boo.
Yeah, but
real quick though, because he's talking Chiefs. CJ says Chiefs are making defensive moves through through trades. Why? Do you guys think that they will draft an offensive lineman late in the draft? Let's be completely honest. Mitch Morris was a huge loss, but guess what? We played almost half the season with him on injured or hurt with a concussion. So, and we did great. We were still running the ball perfectly fine. We're still holding back. One of the most underrated offensive lines in the league is the Kansas City Chiefs offensive line. Not that I don't see them going for an offensive lineman at some point in time in this draft. I don't think it's a dire need like some of these mock drafts are making it sound out to be.
Absolutely. Also, Steve says, don't worry, Jake, Buffalo is on the rise. You'll be doing plenty of positive talk this year. Let me go on the record here, Steve, saying I'm the Buffalo guy in this show, okay? I'm the guy who said they're going to finish second in that division this year. Drew was taking the Jets over them, so let's just say, keep your priorities straight. When I say something, you agree with me because we're both Buffalo fans here, at least more than Drew is.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, okay. I'm about to pull up the film. Moving forward here, let's talk about Chris Harris here. Justin says he wants the Packers to go after Chris Harris because if you haven't heard, Chris Harris said he either wants a brand new contract for big money from the Broncos or he wants them to trade him. Drew, I don't love player demands like this, especially when they're trying to set the tone when they're already under contract. Do you see the Broncos extending him because he asked for it, or could we possibly see Chris Harris leave Denver?
Oh, man. To be honest with you, if Denver got rid of them, they'd be done. I mean, Chris Harris, even though he got banged up last year, he is the best corner on that defense. He's definitely, in my opinion, top 10 corners in the league. Yeah, if he wants to get paid, guess what? Open up the paycheck and pay him. I mean, that's just my opinion. You pay the guy. You don't like the comments. You definitely want to keep it in-house for sure, 100%. But, you know, some of these guys just don't know how to do that. Sometimes the way to get to you is go through social media. Get some of these fans behind you and go and pay the man. Don't let him go.
Absolutely. We don't know what happened in-house. He might have said, give me a contract or trade me, and they were like, no. So he said, all right, well, let's go make a stink about
Let's
this.
see what the fans say about it.
Exactly. So I don't blame him necessarily for wanting to be paid. He's one of the best corners in the league, like you said. He plays in the slot, which everyone kind of criticizes, but that's the hardest position to defend. That's harder than defending a guy on the outside. When Antonio Brown came to town last year, who was on him every play? It was Chris Harris. You know he's the best guy, whether he's guarding the guy in the slot, whether he's guarding the guy in the sideline. He is the number one corner on this team. The NFL is changing. I think we need to change the way we think about corners and saying the nickel corner is not that valuable or he's the third guy in this team. Those are the hardest routes to defend. Over the middle is the hardest way to go. You have so many more options from the inside than you do on the out. When you got a guy who can shut somebody down like that, like Chris Harris, you hang on to him. So I expect to see Denver probably offer him a new contract here. I really don't expect him to leave. But you never know. I mean, I said that about Frank Clark. I thought they were going to get the deal done in Seattle, and Seattle said we can live without him.
Yeah,
I don't know if they get a first, a 2022nd, and swap picks in the third. Maybe they'll trade him too.
I hate to always keep talking about the Chiefs because I sound like Jake talking about the Titans, but like I said,
still haven't mentioned them once.
If the Chiefs don't take their 2 second-round picks and get defensive backs, I'm going to be frustrated because it is a need in the NFL today with how much we throw the ball that they need good corners and a good defensive backs back there. I mean, if it's a safety that's coming up playing nickel, so be it. Pick them.
Steve says if Denver trades Harris, they need to blow it up and start over without Elway. I kind of agree with you. I mean, you see how short he's come up on quarterbacks. How long do you stick with a great for the franchise just because he was a great player there? I mean, just because you're a great player doesn't make you a great GM.
Well, he took him to a Super Bowl and won one. So.
As a player.
No, I'm talking about
I get it. As a GM, okay, but he signed Peyton Manning. Take that year out of it, Drew. How has Denver looked? Because we talk about wasted potential, man. This defense, they should have won multiple Super Bowls. Or at least been in the conversation.
I don't think it matters. Justin says, yeah, it's getting old. We'll talk about the Chiefs for a whole episode now because of you, Justin. I hope you know about that.
It'll be Drew alone because I don't want to hear it
Frank
either.
says, do you guys do a fantasy league with a live draft show? He wants in if so. You know what? We haven't really talked about it.
We've been thinking about it, or at least I have.
No, we haven't talked about it. We've been thinking about it, but that doesn't mean anything.
More to come. So stay tuned, Frank. Going back to the Chris Harris thing, Drew, I just want to offer these final thoughts, and we'll talk NBA next. It depends what this new contract is. You can't break the bank, or you shouldn't want to break the bank just to keep a guy happy, because the first time you give this out, the next guy comes out. It'll be Philip Lindsay saying, I need a new contract. You know, I'm underpaid for where I'm at and everything. It'll be, I would say Joe Flacco, but I don't really think he's viable. Whenever you have these stars, these guys are going to sit there and complain because they know it works. I think they need to take a hardline stance. They need to do what they can to either make this a minimal extension or, you know, just have him play and stick around. Because if you trade him or if you sign him to a new contract, it's almost like he wins either way. I think Denver needs to find some way to soothe the waters without giving him too much of what he wants. Otherwise, it's going to keep happening.
CJ says, who else are they paying? Well, Von Miller for one.
And Bradley Chubb in about 3 years from now.
Well, they're not paying him right now.
No, that's true. They're paying a little bit of money for Joe Flacco. Not a lot. They're paying some money on the offensive line, even though it hasn't worked out tremendously well. Emmanuel Sanders. And they do have money to spend.
Yeah, they got room in the cap. There's no doubt about it. I don't know
like
who
I
else
said,
is their big
the
contract.
The problem comes in not necessarily with how much money you have right now, but the minute you cave and you sit there and say, sure, man, you're upset, we'll give you a new contract, there are going to be a lot of other guys looking around like, you know what, I'm kind of upset. I feel like I'm worth more money. It's time for me to do the same thing. That's why you need to take a hardline stance like Okay, I am going to talk about him here. The Titans have done this a lot. Guys like Jason McCourty, guys like Josh Klein, when they're not playing up to expectations, you need to sit there. I know, you're shocked.
No,
you need
this
to
is
sit
the
there and
furthest
say,
into an episode you didn't talk about the Holy cow, I'm writing this down.
I know. It's a new record. Breaking records every day. When you've got guys that either aren't living up to their value or want new money or want better contracts and they're not living up to it, you need to sit there and stick to your guns and say, we can't give it to you because the minute we give it to you, everybody's going to want it.
Yeah. Well, let's not forget that these players are smart. They know that the Broncos have cap space. They know that they can get paid. To me, if you're not getting a contract and your contract's up, they don't value. I mean, that's crazy to sit there and talk about Chris Harris is not being valued there, but, I mean, there's no doubt about it. Steve is going way out there saying Flacco may end up being traded or cut before the season starts.
Well, he won't be traded. He won't be traded unless they draft somebody like Will Grier, and we have a Patrick Mahomes scenario where or Baker Mayfield, where they're like, wow, this kid's good.
Yeah.
Like, he needs to be on the field. And I know that we waited a year for Patrick Mahomes, but Alex Smith came off his greatest year in his entire career, and they were still like, it's Mahomes' turn.
Then we trade him for a third rounder.
Well, I'm not the GM. I can't control that. But you look at this, obviously, they sat there and said, you know, he's ready to start. If they get a guy like that out of this draft, if they get a quarterback like that out of this draft, Flacco won't be on the team or will be back to being a backup. But right now, the options are pretty thin. I don't see them taking a quarterback at pick 10. They, again, like a lot of other teams, need too many things to go reach on one of these quarterbacks who probably isn't going to be good enough.
Justin said 36 minutes and 6 seconds before mentioning them. Great job.
I was fiending for it, too. I was like, I'm going to say something.
You got the itch, huh? You got the itch.
Also, CJ says pay them. Look, man, CJ, you can't pay everybody. That's the rule of the NFL, right? With a hard salary cap, it's not like baseball. It's not like basketball where you can just go spend what you need to keep your guys around. You only have so much money to work with, and the teams that are successful usually are teams like the Patriots that get guys at a value. They get better talent than what they're paying for. So I get it. Chris Harris is a great player. You want to see him paid. You want to see him stay in Denver. But you can't pay everybody, and if you give in on one, the next guy's going to come out looking for his contract too.
Dale, we always appreciate your comments. He goes, Colts are winning the Super Bowl.
We don't appreciate that one. At least I don't, as a Titans fan. We don't appreciate that. They need more weapons. On a serious note, they need more weapons. If the offensive line plays as well as they did last year, if they can add a couple receivers to the mix and get the defense buffed up a little bit, we're going to be talking about them challenging teams like Kansas City because Andrew Luck is still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But if they kind of pull a Chris Ballard stunt here and don't do enough with that $100 million they had sitting in their pocket and they kind of hold off on the draft, I don't know. I mean, I like Chris Ballard. You can't argue with what he's done up till now, but you had $100 million and you spent about 14 of it. So I really don't know here, Drew. It's tough for me to say Super Bowl when you have all these options on the table and they did not play aggressively.
I think we've done our NFL due diligence.
I think so. I think Steve's ready to talk basketball, too. He's asking, can Toronto pull off the series against Phillies? I think the other direction is where the way you need to ask, can the 76ers pull off the series against Toronto? I think Toronto's the better team. I look at this. I mean, yeah, the 76ers, they're a good team. You look at them on paper, you're like, this team should be dominant. But let's not forget, this is a team that gave up a couple games to the Nets. They let the Nets hang around on them and everything. I mean, they were sitting there texting on their phones after the Nets were blowing them out. So I got to sit there and say Toronto, to me, is probably the favorite.
Man, I think you nailed it right on the head. I think the more question is, what do the 76ers have? I mean, they're having in-house issues. They're having issues with their players being, like, caring. They seem like they don't care. I think it's an issue. I think it's a huge issue. You bring in someone like Jimmy Butler, who made all kinds of controversy being in teams and not being where he wanted to be and wanting a trade and this and that, and you bring him in, and I'm not saying it's just him, but I'm just saying you create a lot of issues there. And when you look at a team like Toronto, who's trying their hardest to keep Kawhi Leonard there and trying to look like the team that doesn't keep going to the East Championship and bombing every time, I mean, this team's got a lot of drive. The 76ers should have the drive too. I mean, it's been a long time since they've been that good. But it just seems like this is Toronto's series. To be honest, if the Sixers pull this series out, I'd be very, very surprised.
I'm kind of with you there. And again, if you want to keep Kawhi Leonard around in Toronto, obviously he said he didn't want to go there at first. He goes to Toronto. They trade for him anyway. If you want to keep him around, you got to make a deep run into this playoffs. It at least needs to be Eastern Conference Finals. If you don't make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, I think he walks, and Toronto is going to take that big step backward that everyone's kind of afraid to in the NBA because it's so hard to build one of these teams. There's only 5, 6, 7 of these teams that realistically have even a shot of winning the championship. If you lose a guy like Kawhi, I don't really see you getting a replacement for him. Toronto's not the sexiest market. They have higher taxes because they're in Canada. I don't see you luring one of these superstars out there to go rebuild his team if Kawhi walks. You need to keep him around. You need to keep him happy with the way things are going. I think they need to win the series. And I question the 76ers' heart. Kind of like you, I don't think they have that kind of drive, that kind of win. I think Toronto is going to have that energy kind of advantage on them because they expect to win. This is the team that I want to remind you, has been challenging even when LeBron was there. They just haven't been good enough to beat LeBron. Well, guess what? He's gone now. Now is the time where they ascend. Now is the time where they step forward. I think Toronto is going to win this series. I'm not going to say handily. I think it goes to 6 or 7. But I think Toronto needs to win the series, and I think they're going to win the series because they need it more than the 76ers do, who have been trusting the process and everything, saying, relax, things are going to be fine.
I got 2 questions for you. It's kind of a 2-part question. Really have nothing to do with each other. It's kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. So, if they go, Kawhi Leonard signs a long-term contract with Kawhi there and Kyle Lowry there. Kyle. I've been stuck on that.
Tough.
I've been stuck on that whole thing with Kyler. Will they? Those 2 names alone, can they bring in another big star because they're there? Second part
they
is
should.
Hold on. Second part is if they don't and Kawhi walks, I'm going to go off of Steve's comment. Should the Toronto Raptors trade Lowry?
Kyle Lowry, yeah.
God, yeah. I'm going to stumble on that.
Move him out of there. I love Kyle Lowry as a player. He's a good, number 2, number 3 star on a team. But the problem is he's not the guy who carries the franchise. It's all Kawhi. I get it. They had some success when it was him and DeRozan. DeRozan's gone now, too. You're missing that 1-2 punch there. I really don't think Kyle Lowry's the answer. They'll be afraid to. They'll keep him around. But if it's me, I'd get aggressive. I'd go after as many guys as I could. I'd probably trade him. If Kawhi walks and I'm not able to lure one of these free agents, I would absolutely blow it up and try to go get somebody else. I don't think you're winning championships with just Kyle Lowry. You got to get better than that. So, yes, I really do see them moving on and blowing everything up if Kawhi walks and they don't replace him. Now, let's say they lure someone like Kevin Durant or they get Klay Thompson or something who can play next to Kawhi, hopefully, but let's say Kawhi moves on, who can play next to Kyle Lowry, fine.
What if they win? What if they keep Kawhi? Can Lowry and Kawhi, is that enough to bring another
Kawhi
big
by
star
himself
there?
makes them a contender, especially in the East. Kawhi will make them a contender. Yes, you keep Lowry at that point. Now, if I could trade him and get someone like a Klay Thompson or something like that, or someone else, I know he's going to be a free agent, but if I could trade him and move on from another piece, I'd probably do that too. But if he's the number 2 on a team, you could win a championship or at the very least make an appearance in the finals. If not, move on. Like I said, if Kawhi moves on and he doesn't want to be there, he wants to go be a Clipper or something instead, trade Kyle Lowry too, because him by himself is not going to be enough to get Toronto a championship.
All right, let's not dwell on this because I know Ron has been holding off very patiently to talk about his
Damian Lillard, man.
talk about his Portland Trailblazers. But Justin said, if the NBA doesn't give the Greek Freak the MVP, he's never going to watch another NBA game ever again.
Well, he's my pick. I mean, obviously,
you
you got a lot of guys that put up a lot of stats, like Harden's and the Westbrooks of the world. But I would pick Giannis. You look at the way he took the Bucks to a 1 seed. For me, it's hands down. He is the MVP in the NBA this year because, again, this was a team that 2 years ago we were talking about as a non-factor. He shows up, turns them into the 1 seed in the East, pretty much winning a conference. Especially if they move on to the finals, yeah, absolutely, he needs to be the MVP. If he isn't, it's a slight in my book. I really don't think anyone else. Like you look at the way the Rockets finished with guys like Chris Paul and James Harden on this team finishing at a 4 seed. There's no way you can give it to someone else. I really don't think so. I mean, LeBron's way out of it. I mean, the Lakers didn't even get close. Andy had the injury. To me, it's Giannis all the way. I don't see anyone else up there in that conversation. I think it's pretty cut and dry.
Harden's the only one that's really up there, but
they were a 4 seed, Drew, and I get it's the West, but
it's just what he does on the court.
Well, I know he drops a lot of points. That's great. That's fantastic.
That's what this league's about right now.
Well, so does Giannis. He scores too. He drives in. He does a lot of stuff. And he plays better defense. When was the last time you saw James Harden play defense?
It
was probably last playoffs.
Giannis is the MVP.
Honestly,
Giannis is the MVP. There's no doubt about it. They're going to give it to him because Harden was MVP last year. There's no doubt about it. But don't sit there and tell me that Giannis scores points like Harden does. No one scores like Harden does. Maybe Curry, and that's it.
Now, also, CJ's asking who is going to beat the Bucks. Honestly, I think the Celtics matchup, if the Celtics hit their groove, because the whole talk about the Celtics was they have not ever really hit their stride for the entire season long. Well, they just got a sweep in the first round. If they fire on all cylinders, this is going to be a great series. I still think the Bucks are probably going to win it in 7. But if I had to pick one of these teams that could get hot and beat them, I'd probably say the Celtics are first, then the Raptors after that. And then Golden State. If you're asking who's going to stop them from winning a championship, Golden State.
Yeah.
Or like pretty much everyone else. You can sit there and point to Golden State saying they're going to beat them.
Let's talk about the Portland Trailblazers.
Let's talk about the Trailblazers, Drew, because I look at this, and honestly, I thought OKC was going to win this one in 7 games. I doubted Damian Lillard. I'll be the first one to sit there and say it. I thought this was going to be one of those series.
That's Ron's MVP if they win the finals.
Did you see that shot he made at the end of that game?
You know that's not the first time he's done that?
I know, but I saw that, man. I was like, he's shooting like 65% from like 30 feet and out.
You nailed it. Who said that? Someone said it's beautiful, and I absolutely, completely agree. It was Steve. He said the shot was a thing of beauty. I mean, it just shows how dominant it is. And I know Ron's with me. This isn't the first time this guy has done well. Damian Lillard has been
it's like I said before. He's the best guy we haven't been talking about.
And he gets ignored because he's playing in Portland. That just shows how big being in a big city like Toronto has issues bringing in superstars is because no one pays attention to that market. It's so unfair. It shouldn't be like that, but it's just the way it is. But man, if the Portland Trailblazers can get up there and beat, the likes of the Rockets or the Warriors, man, I mean it'd be exciting. Let me just be completely honest. They're not going to beat my Nuggets, but I'm just saying.
The Nuggets haven't even made it through, Drew. They're sitting at 3-2.
Oh no, they're about to beat. Don't worry,
they got it.
The Spurs. Yeah, they got it.
Well, as long as you're sure about it. Look, when I look at Portland, I know Ron's sitting there saying they're winning the championship and everything. Let me just say, pump the brakes a little bit because Westbrook has struggled in the playoffs. Okay, OKC has struggled in the playoffs the past 3 years now. They've not been one of these teams that has pretty much since Durant left. They have been
not
a non-factor.
won an away game since Durant left.
Right, and I look at this, man. I get it. It was a great win. I didn't pick them to do it, especially the way Paul George was playing. Westbrook was there too. I did not pick them to win that series. But all I'm going to sit there and say is Portland fans, at least sit there and say we got through round 1. That was a great win. It was a great series. Regardless of what happens, you have something to be proud of. As to whether they're going to go into the next round and beat someone like Golden State, if that's who they wind up matching up against, or not Golden State, I'm sorry. If I'm drawing a blank here, actually. I got myself twisted. If they wind up playing someone like the Spurs or something, I don't think they're going to sit there and blow the Spurs out. Well, they wouldn't play the Spurs. It would be the Nuggets. Again, this is one of those teams that they're good enough that, sure, maybe they make a Western Conference Finals, but do you see them going up against Houston or Golden State? If that is the series that they wind up playing next, do you see them beating one of those teams, Drew? Let me answer that for you. No. Not even close.
It's going to be a struggle. There's no doubt about it. Kevin asked, where's our Blackhawks stuff? Man, you send us some, we'll put it out there. Unfortunately, we just don't have any of it. He also said, go Bucks. He said, fear the deer. I think we're in agreement with you, man. I think we see the Bucks going pretty far in the East.
I think they're still the favorite for me. Obviously, they're the 1 seed. It's not very controversial to say the 1 seed is the favorite to move on to the finals. But if I had to pick one right now, I'd put my money on the Bucks. I like the way they're playing. It's good team basketball. Giannis, to me, is the MVP here. He's a great inside the arc player. He's one of those guys that dominates pretty much anywhere inside the arc. I get it. He's not maybe the best three-point guy, but that's fine. You don't need a shot always if you've got other guys on the team who can shoot.
So you asked me, does the Portland Trail Blazers beat the team in the next series they play against, correct?
If it's the Nuggets, I'm gonna call it a good series. I still think I'd pick the Nuggets, though.
Dude, I am with CJ. Nuggets are so underrated. They had the best home court record in the NBA this year. Yeah, they don't have a bunch of all-stars as some of these other teams do, or all-stars that have been around for a while.
They don't have big names. They've got great players, just not big names.
They're a young team that are hungry, and they still got to get past the Spurs. But I believe in them, man. I do. But beyond that, you're asking me, can the Portland Trail Blazers beat the next elite level of teams? Because if you're talking about the Rockets, or if you're talking about the Warriors, the thing is, it can't be Damian by himself. There has to be another guy that steps up and plays at elite caliber, especially if it's the Warriors. There's no doubt about it, because when you got 3/4
if it's the Warriors,
it's
game over. Just write that one off.
You have to play at an elite level at all times without ever taking a break, and
it won't be in the next round. They're guaranteed not to play the Warriors in the next round, but still, I get what you're saying. If they move on to the Western Conference Finals.
I'm getting the point. I get what you're saying. As much as Lillard has done so well and has played so great, it's you got to have more than just him. He's not LeBron James. And that's no knock on him. He's just not. LeBron barely could do it by himself. More of the time, he couldn't do it by himself.
Realistically, he couldn't. I mean, if you look at the series he beat Golden State, it took a lot of ref help to kind of get those calls, to get them back in when they were down 3-1. So, look, I look at this series. I look at the Nuggets. I get what you're saying. They're underrated, but I think they're underrated for a reason. I even said it beforehand. I didn't think they were getting the love shown to a 2 seed that really they deserved to this point. But you look at the way they've played. You look at the way they've struggled with a team like the Spurs that they should be able to handle. A 2 seed should be able to beat a 7 seed, pretty much no contest, but it's 3-2.
Well,
Drew, again,
I get it. I get what you're saying, but you know what? In the history of them two playing against each other, the Spurs have always had the Nuggets number. They always have. I mean, is it the coach? Is it Popovich? Maybe. I mean, it just seems like every time we've ever faced the Spurs in the playoffs, we lose that series. And, I mean, let's just be completely honest. The Nuggets don't have that great of a playoff record. But maybe this year's different because it's a completely different team.
Kevin asked, who's my homie? You are, Kevin. You're my homie. All right. Talking about this series here really quick before we move on here, Drew. Let's say the Nuggets do win this, and I think they're going to. They're up 3-2. I think they're the more talented team in San Antonio. I said that before. I think youth has been kind of a disadvantage to them, and they've got Popovich in San Antonio. Let's say they move on here.
But when they took that 2-1 lead, you did believe in them.
No, I didn't. I said they were going to win it in 7. Or no, I said they were going to lose in 7, actually. I took San Antonio in 7. I still might be right. Honestly, Drew, I look at this. Experience is huge in the playoffs. I am still worried about it. I don't think this is their year. I'd like to see them get through this round.
They're going to beat them in San Antonio.
I'd like to see them get through this round so they can get some experience. So next year they come back stronger. Maybe add another guy or two, and we're talking about the Nuggets winning the championship at that point. But for now, I look at this series, Drew, and I see them going up against Portland. I think Portland can win that series. I think Portland can beat the Nuggets if that's what it takes. I think the Nuggets are a better team, but the lack of experience, I think I'd go Trailblazers there too. Let's talk about Golden State and Houston. Obviously, let's say that comes to pass because I think that's probably most likely what's going to happen.
He said Mahomes is your homie.
Oh, Mahomes is my homie? I mean, I like him. I'd take him on my team. Going back here really quick here to talk about this basketball series here. Let's say it's Houston versus Golden State. Who are you taking in that one?
I actually think Houston can beat them. I think there's one team that can beat them. It's Houston.
Yeah, I agree with that.
They should have beat them last year.
Yeah, kinda.
If it wasn't for Chris Paul being injured, it's a good possibility they did.
And the Clippers stole one against him. Anything's possible, right? I don't know, Drew. I look at this series, man.
I get it. Everyone's hot. You would never go to Vegas and put your money against the Warriors losing. I got it.
I wouldn't even do a beer bet on it.
But if there is one team in the West, that is the team that can beat them.
Yeah, I mean, they score. They keep up with Golden State, and that's what you have to do. You have to go pound for pound with them in the scoring. I don't think you can put a good enough defense out there in front of them to frustrate this team, at least the way the NBA's run anymore, where you can't touch anyone, you can't play any kind of physical defense at all. There's no slowing down this Warriors scoring. You have to match them if you're going to have any chance. If there's a team to do it, it's Houston. This, to me, might as well be the NBA Finals, because if Houston doesn't get it, maybe Milwaukee has the muscle to do it, but beyond that, I don't see Toronto beating this team. I don't see the 76ers winning. I don't see the Nuggets doing it, even though they're the 2 seed. Drew, nobody has the muscle to square up with Golden State like Houston does. This is the best series. We're just getting it probably in round 2 as long as the Nuggets take care of business. Honestly, Golden State's going to win another championship. We're all going to be tired of it. Maybe the team breaks up after the season, but they're going to get another one done beforehand.
Sharif, we're glad you could join us, man. I mean, even if you are watching your game, maybe just throw us on mute or something like that. We just appreciate you.
Throw the game on mute and listen to us. Get your priorities straight.
That's what I meant.
Well, why don't we talk hockey?
Steve said...
Jake, why don't we talk about what Steve said first?
Jake, you would take Rosen at this point, and he would.
I would take Josh Rosen. I'd take anyone over Marcus. No, I wouldn't take anyone. But, yeah, I'd take Josh Rosen at this
Blake
point.
Bortles is out there.
Yeah, thanks, man. We'll get on the phone with him. I would take Rosen at this point because you're getting a quarterback who's incredibly cheap. I don't care what happened in last year's game. He's going to a new system. He's going to have better weapons around him. He's going to have a better offensive line, which isn't saying much when you look at the way Arizona played. Blocking for him, yeah, I'm not saying phone it in on Rosen. I like Rosen as a player. He was my second quarterback off the board in my mock draft last year. Yep. I still like him as a player. I'd take him in my team in a heartbeat, especially when you're paying him like $600K you would take after you trade for him.
Let's talk hockey.
All right, let's talk hockey. Let's not go back to the NFL. We can follow that.
I don't want to talk about the Titans. No one does.
I do. Moving forward, let's talk about the last game going on in round 1 of the playoffs. Thanks, man. The Hurricanes squaring off against the Capitals in the Game 7, Drew. I didn't see it going to 7.
I didn't
I thought
either.
the Caps had this one in hand.
I thought so too.
But the Hurricanes have battled back, man. I look at this game. Could we see the reigning champs get bounced in round 1 by the Carolina Hurricanes?
I don't think so. I honestly think that the Caps can win this. I think all the series, literally besides maybe, well, even with the Tampa Bay going out, I mean, it's been a heck of a series. All of them have been a heck of a series. It's literally, I'm telling you right now, this is some of the best hockey I've seen played in a while in these playoffs. I mean, everything is just going nuts. But the Caps had the experience. As much as the Hurricanes have done really well against them, you can't deny experience when it comes down to it, especially during a Game 7 where everything's on the line.
CJ says the Caps are fine. They dragged it out on purpose. I don't know if anyone drags it out on purpose. I think you want to get that 4-game sweep so you can get out of it and get an extra rest on the team you have to play against in the next round. What they don't want is to have to go into the next round playing the Islanders, who, again, got a sweep on the Penguins, who have been resting up.
Yeah.
And you had to just go play a physical Game 7, and then a couple days later got to go match up with the team on like 4, 5, 6 days rest. I know you want to stay sharp at some point, but honestly, this is not what I want to go face a defensive team like the Islanders coming off of 5 days rest. So I'm worried if I'm a Caps fan right now. Even if you get through the series, that's a tough matchup. That will be their matchup next round, I believe. Going forward, it'll be the winner of whichever team gets through the series. So Capitals have a lot to worry about. Now they're up 2-0 after the first. That's going on right now. So it's looking like they're probably going to be able to pull through. But again, Drew, I look at this series, man. Game 7 against a team like the Hurricanes, they should have been able to handle business.
Yeah, but you look at Tampa Bay Lightning and they should handle business.
I did. To be fair, I said they were going to sweep them, and they didn't. Also, CJ said go Blues. I'm not sure why he was saying the Caps are fine if he's rooting for the Blues, but that's okay. I guess you can have East and West teams.
Steve says Boston is his pick now. They clean the ice with us. Toronto needs something, but I don't know
Let me just
what.
get some props here really quick. All those Toronto fans out there, everyone telling me Toronto was they were going to be fine and asked me if they're winning the championship. Told you. I hate to rub salt in the wound, Steve, but I'm pretty sure we talked about this, man. I said Boston was going to escape the series against Toronto. They did. I look at this setup, man. I think they're going to be Boston's the team to beat in the East, or one of them at the very least. It's a good series going forward for them. But I look at the East right now. They've got the Blue Jackets right now, who I don't want to call them lucky for sweeping the Lightning, but they got them at the right time. I don't see them having the same success against the Bruins.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think Bruins are doing some amazing stuff on the ice right now, and I think they're a pretty heavy favorite to definitely win this series. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely. CJ also said, what a freaky game with San Jose and Vegas. Absolutely, man. Pavelski got dominated. They got that 5-minute major penalty, and the Sharks were like, okay, here's our chance. And they scored 4 goals in 5 minutes or something?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely crazy game, man.
And then went into overtime.
And I saw Marchessault was out there sitting there saying it was BS, that there was a major penalty and all this stuff. But
that's the question.
Look, you look at
Did
that
they
hit,
get
man.
robbed?
No.
Did they get robbed?
That was one of the worst cross checks. Just absolutely blast a guy I've seen in a while. It was rough, man. That was a major penalty. Okay, he was off his skates.
You
Drew.
went to Game 7.
He was off his skates, and they blew him up.
Do you get robbed?
Here's the thing. Don't cross-check someone like that if it's Game 7.
You went to the championship last year. Do you get robbed at Game 7 and going against your first seed that you're playing against?
You got relaxed rules for drafting all your players, so you have an amazing team.
You
where
played
everyone
against
else
one of
sucks
the
when they come
oldest
to the league.
rosters
I
in
know.
the NHL, and you go to a game. I don't know, man. To me, it's not robbed. Is the play a little dirty? Maybe.
Oh, a little dirty, Drew. They cracked his skull open on the ice.
Maybe, but it wasn't the hit to the head. It was literally a hit to the chest, and then his
But
head bounced off the ice.
Yeah, but it was while he was off his skates. He was in midair, and they blew him up.
When you slow it down, it looks a lot worse than what it
Yeah,
is.
it looked bad.
in real time. And when you're talking about something that goes real quick like that, I mean, you make the right move. You take out their best player. Did he get injured? Unfortunately, he did. But hopefully he'll be ready for the next series at some point. But that's just something that happens in hockey. That's why everyone loves hockey.
Also, Kevin asked, do we think the Brewers will win the Central again? Going back to baseball, I said we weren't going to talk about it today, but I always love to be proved wrong. I'm going to tell you this, Steve, Kevin, they shouldn't. This should be the Cubs' division to win. When you look at the bats they have and everything, if their starting pitching figures it out, I'm still going to take the Cubs to figure it out by the end of October. But if they don't, I think the Brewers are my second pick. I still like the Cardinals as well, but I have them second here. I still have them as a wild card team. This is a team that's kind of rebuilt itself pretty quick.
Steve says he's not salty at all about his Maple Leafs losing, but they got my respect. Could it be the youth that is hindering us?
Yeah, I don't think they're there yet. I think if you get maybe an upgrade at goalie. I don't know if they've got strong enough goaltending play right now. The defense needs some work, but I think they can score. I love those top 3 guys that they have in Tavares, in Austin Matthews, in Mitch Marner. I mean, they've got some stars on this team, right? The problem is those stars are eating up a lot of money. I think they just need to add some more depth and maybe a little bit better defense. And we're talking about Toronto being a legitimate contender.
What's up, Bees? Glad you could join us, man. He says, no way can you justify that dirty play, and it needs to go. Man.
Well, they got a 5-minute major, all right? I mean, Pavelski, he paid the price, but he probably got the Sharks through
I'm not
on that
trying
one
to justify it. I'm not trying to justify it, but I'm saying it wasn't a shot to the head. Yes, he was in air, but he hit him in the chest. I mean...
But it was a cross-check. The first guy hit him, and then while he was off balance, they came in and just blasted him.
I get it. But usually those majors are usually when they're targeting heads, and that's where I'm getting at.
It was probably the blood on the ice, to be honest. Like, the fact he was bleeding, and it was like coming out of the back of his head. Yeah, I mean,
was bad.
That's what made it a major, I think. If he didn't bust his head open, let's say he just like slapped his head against the ice and then got up afterward, it probably just would have been a regular penalty. But the fact that he bled everywhere, I think the refs are like, okay, we'll make that a major. And like I said, Pavelski paid the price, man, but he pretty much single-handedly got the Sharks into the next round.
Yeah, he did.
So, I mean, if that play doesn't happen, the Sharks probably don't make it.
I think so, too.
Absolutely. All right, Drew, let's talk about some of these other series here.
Let's do it.
Bruins, Blue Jackets. Can they pull off another miracle? I don't want to call it a miracle. They are a good team. They're a playoff team in the NHL.
No, it's a miracle.
Can they pull off another amazing series and beat a team like Boston?
No, I think Bruins have this. I do, too. To be honest, I think it'll be a quicker series than a lot of people see it. Yes, Blue Jackets are going to have all this time to get healthy and rest, but I just think the Bruins are just a better team.
Okay, well, let's move on and talk about the Stars and the Blues. We talked about that a little bit, so let's not dwell on it too much. I look at the Stars and I look at the Blues, and I think the Blues are sitting there thanking their lucky stars. I wasn't going to say it, but I'll say it anyway. That this wasn't Nashville, because I think this would have been a better matchup for them. Even though the Blues are the hotter team right now, the Stars are a one-line team. Yeah. And the fact that Nashville choked away that first series to them, I think the Blues are moving on to the next round because of this. They should be able to handle that first line. And then except for that, like this should be the Blues in 5 or 6 games.
I'll say what I've been saying about this ever since these series started is it doesn't matter who came out of the Stars and the Predators game, because either if it was the Jets or the Blues, none of them are going to beat these two teams. The way the Blues are playing right now and the way the Jets were playing too, I mean, you're talking about two teams that are just dominating.
I do agree with that.
I think the better of the two teams came out of it. And the way the Blues are playing, I absolutely think that they're the better team.
I think when you look at it on paper, Winnipeg's better. But you're right. With that hot streak the Blues are on, they're playing much better hockey. I look at the way if I'm the Blues, I'm sitting there saying we're hot right now. We get to play like a team like the Stars in round 2 of the playoffs.
I don't think you can bring up any of the roster anymore. I don't think you can bring up on paper. Look at Tampa Bay. You can no longer do it, dude.
Well, it is hockey. I mean, you just throw something against the board. That's just going to win that's going to throw a dart against the board. You can no longer
say on paper. The Blues right now and even the Boston Bruins are the two hottest teams, I think, going in. Yes, they didn't sweep their series, but they played against better teams than well, I guess I can't say that either because Tampa Bay lost. They're considered the best team. It's just... at this point in time, the Bruins, I think, are going to win that series, and I think the Blues will also win their series.
And CJ says he would have rather seen the Preds struggling in this series, but let me just say this. I think when you look at it, I'd rather get Dallas because this is a team that barely squeaked into the playoffs, is not that talented, I don't believe, beyond that first line. This is the team to play. I mean, they're a little physical, but the Blues should have no problem dealing with that. They've got some big defenders as well. They're going to win the series, and they're going to win it easily. I think they're getting the much better roster in Dallas versus having to play someone like Nashville that has stars. They have pretty good lines all the way through, Nashville does. They just underachieved. So, to me, I'd still rather play the team that's just not really that good versus the team that is that good but is just not playing that well.
Yeah, and CJ's also saying they can't score, and there's no doubt about it. And when I just blanked out his name, but his last name, Jordan, the goalie for the Blues.
I wasn't even... Bennington,
that's what it is. If the Predators would have gone against it, trust me, there would have been no scoring at all. It would have been a very low-scoring affair. I know that someone said Renee was CJ also said that Renee is struggling. To be honest with you, I think it would have been a low-scoring affair regardless. Whoever the Predators play, it's usually going to be a low-scoring affair.
That is true, but they should have booted Renee for UC Saros instead. Saros has like a .950 save percentage in the playoffs or something like that. In the 12 games he's had to come in because Pekka struggled. They should have changed goalies, especially after, I think it was, Game 4 where the Stars just absolutely obliterated them. Yeah, they should have changed goalies and gone with a younger gun there. They didn't want to do it because, obviously, Renee has been there for a long time. They didn't want to embarrass him or anything like that, but You got to go with the guys who's going to win you hockey games. If they would have done that, I think there'd probably be Nashville in the second round.
Shay, I'm glad you could join us, man.
Even though Renee did have a good game 7. I don't want to sit there and say it was totally terrible afterward, but he did have a good game there at the end. Or game 6, I mean. All right. Moving forward here, Drew, let's talk about our last one, the Avalanche and the Sharks. Because I look at this series, man, this is going to be interesting. I didn't have either one of these teams moving on. I mean, I saw the Sharks as a close loss. I thought the Avalanche were going to get handled in round 1. But
they did not.
It went the other way around. I mean, props to you for calling it.
I did call it.
Again, you talk about one-line teams. I think the Avalanche are a one-line team. I mean, they have Ristolainen. They got some good guys on that. McKinnon on the top line. Beyond that, there's not a lot of stars in this team, but they got the job done against the Flames. I think this team, who knows? They're hot. The Sharks just got done with a 7-game series. They're old to begin with. We could see the Avalanche moving on to the Western Conference Finals.
I had the Avalanche winning this.
The Stanley Cup? That's pretty bold.
No. I don't know about that. But I haven't won this series. I'm kind of with Steve. He says he has Avalanche in 7. I do think it's going to be a longer series. I think it will push Avalanche to the brink of breaking because, like you said, their depth is not as deep as other teams. But I think the Avalanche absolutely have a chance to win this series. No doubt about it. If this was the Golden Knights, even though they lost, I'd probably pick against the Avalanche.
I agree. And CJ's saying Sharks in 5. I would take the Knights if they made it through because they're the younger team. The Sharks with that age, going through such an emotional win in a Game 7 where you're fatigued as well, overtime in Game 7 no less. I got to give it to the Avalanche. Again, we got that team that's been waiting for like 4 or 5 days now, sitting around like, okay, we're ready to play. And the Sharks, who are old and going to be incredibly tired here, I think the Avalanche get out to an early lead. We'll see the Sharks rebound a little bit because they'll feel the end coming up upon them, and I really don't see them pulling it off. I think the Avalanche win this one in 6 or 7 as well.
I agree.
All right, Drew, why don't we do some special thanks? As a quick reminder, before we do that, we're going to be at the draft this weekend, starting tomorrow. It's going to be fun. We don't know what it's going to look like, but we're going to show you what's going on as best we can down in Nashville.
The way they're doing it is you get a digital line and you kind of stand there and you wait until your name's called and then you get to go in and be in the main stage. So if it's Jake in the main stage or if it's me in the main stage, who knows? Maybe both of us.
Or more than likely neither of us.
We'll just deal with it. We'll be live. We'll definitely be filming there a little bit. You guys will see us off and on. We probably won't stay live the whole entire time because unfortunately,
absolutely not.
Cell phones just don't have the power to do that. But hey guys, I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening and thank you for all the comments, the likes, the shares. It means the world to us. We're here to talk sports with you. We love to think that this is your guys' show too, so we enjoy everyone's comments.
Just really quick before we do our special thanks, Shay says the Raiders are drafting Kyler Murray. Let me tell you, Shay, that bet still stands. It ain't gonna happen. Go ahead, Drew. Special thanks.
All right, guys. CJ says he lives in Chattanooga, man, and he says
howdy,
Nashville
neighbor.
is awesome, man. It's Nashville.
It'll be a good time. Even if we don't get in there, it'll be a good time.
We have what we think about what the draft should have been versus what they're going to do, but so be it. We'll be there and we'll deal with it. But real quick, for all the guys that comment.
We'll be back next week to complain about it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, we will complain, no doubt. Real quick, Frank, Steve, Damon, Bo, Ron, Ken, Robert, CJ, Justin, Deo, Kevin, Sharif, Bees, Shay. You guys are all awesome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we appreciate everything you guys do.
Absolutely, guys. Great show. We can't wait to see you tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, just talk about the draft and everything going on with that. We're really excited with it. It's going to be our first travel kind of adventure for the show, so bear with us. I don't know what it's going to look like, but we're going to make it as good as possible.
And Jeremy, better late than never. You're absolutely right, man. We appreciate you, even though you caught us at the very end.
Special thanks to you. Good to see you, Jeremy. So for Sports Around the Bar, we will see you guys tomorrow at some point for the NFL Draft.